Hey listeners, Bookish Flights has been nominated for the Women in Podcasting Awards in the Authors and Books category. If you could head over to www.womenpodcasters.com/vote and vote for Bookish Flights in the Author and Books category, I would greatly appreciate it. Your vote would go a long way in helping the podcast gain visibility and spread our love for books and reading. Head to the show notes to get a direct link to vote. Thank you. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Hannah Levin. Hannah is a neurodivergent dog mom who grew up in northern New Jersey and currently resides in the DC metropolitan area. Her writing career began with poetry and fan fiction in her early teen years. Luckily, she's come a long way in the decades since. During the day, she writes repetitive marketing copy to pay the bills, but by night she writes fantasy romance to feed the dreamers. She has several projects in the works at any given time, usually with common themes of relatable characters, a healthy balance of plot and spice, and gradual relationship development. After a long struggle with ADHD, Hannah's debut novel, The Treasured One, comes out on July 9th, 2024. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. You have no idea.
Yay! I'm so glad to have you. Listeners, I just finished The Treasured One this week and I loved it. I emailed Hannah right away. I'm like, is there going to be more?
Yeah, I've had a couple of ARC readers actually. It's been such an experience to have strangers, being like, yeah, I read your book and I loved it. And yeah, I've been just so grateful for the outpouring of support that I've received and so glad that people are enjoying something that my little brain came up with. So thank you so much for the feedback. I
You're
appreciated it.
welcome. It has to be the best feeling ever of like, this came from me. Everything in there is
Hmm.
for me.
Hmm.
I actually hesitated in emailing you because like we have never met in real life. And I was like, well, I don't want her to feel like I don't know if that's a question that authors hate. It was like, well, when's the next one coming? Because I imagine you pour a ton of time to write these books. And so I'm like, I don't want to come across as that, but I just wanted you to know I love it and I would love to hear more of their world. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Honestly, I am super open. Anybody, anytime can reach out to me. I am happy to chat with people. And yeah, I'm happy to talk about projects that are coming up and all that. So, really, it's fine. And it is weird, I will say, coming from an author's perspective now, like you will sit there working really hard on a project for months. And I mean, The Treasured One took me about a year to write.
okay.
So, you're spending that long on something and then somebody could devour it in an afternoon or a week. And then they're like, yeah, when's the next one coming out? It's like, I'm working on it. It's going to be a little while, but that's just how it is.
Yeah. And like I said, for me, it was just coming from the perspective of like, I loved it and I would love to hear more. It wasn't like, hurry up and write another.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you.
Well, let's entice the listeners to about the treasured one. Can you tell them about it?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Treasured One is about a young woman named Avery who has these unique healing powers that she was born with, and she's trying to navigate her own kind of personal growth as well as like love and diplomacy in this fantasy world where there's fae and magic and all of this. And she has to accomplish this somehow without inciting the next world war. So it sounds very dramatic. There's a lot going on. But really, it's a little on the cozier side. There's more of a focus on the relation development and all that, on the relationship development and all that. So, I like to describe it as like it's equal parts cozy vibes and then everything that we want from a romantasy. So like we have the stakes and the war and the political intrigue and royalty and all that and the magic, of course. But then you also have the cute relationship and the friendly banter between the main characters and all of that. So
Yeah, and back to your intro about relatable characters, I think that's why I got sucked in, not only the suspenseful elements that you're listing, but also just the relatable characters. And that for me will hook me in any story if I feel like we are, on the same, not the same level, but just I can relate to them and to their lives and what they're going through. I mean, I'm not living with
Mhm.
Faye by any means, but just like you said, in their relationships and how they're navigating that. And that's an automatic hook for me in a book.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, I really appreciate that in a book. I feel like I love so many of the popular romantasy books that are out right now. But also I was having trouble finding female main characters that I connected with because a lot of them were just kind of sassy, always had a retort for everything, always knew who they were and what they were doing, and were confident in themselves and their relationship and knew how to fight, like were physically strong and capable, and that's not me. So
Yeah.
I really wanted to have a character where she's awkward. She doesn't know who she is and what she's doing. She's still, a young woman, like 22. I feel like I am still figuring myself out now. I'm 25, but when
Okay.
I was 22, same situation. Like I was still figuring out who I was and what I was doing and what the world was around me, like magic aside, fae aside, like just trying to figure myself out.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I feel like I wanted to communicate that kind of awkwardness, that kind of um, learning that it's okay to say what you want and to find your own voice. I think that's really important, especially for young women. So, yeah, that's kind
Yeah.
of a drive for me in writing Avery the way that I did.
And in a supported community, I think too, right? Is like we can feel like we are safe to be awkward because we know the people around us love us. And I think there's that happening in the novel too, right? As she made this community and felt like she could be herself within that. And
Yeah.
so do you feel like you've written yourself into the character somewhat?
Somewhat. I'd like to think I'm not that awkward, but then again, yeah, she definitely has a lot of aspects of my own character in terms of being a people pleaser. That's something that I'm personally working on. Where she obviously, in her case, she has these healing powers, which are hugely important and helpful in our world. But in terms of her to the not really having the ability to make her own choices, that's really one of her biggest struggles. And I've definitely felt that way a few times. So being able to just kind of give her the kind of fantasy that I always wanted, where you kind of get this escape into a world that's just beautiful and amazing and filled with fascinating things. That's kind of like she's achieving a dream of mine. So yeah, yeah, you could definitely say there's a little bit of me in there.
Yeah, well, what a fun way to create and write out that fantasy of yours. Like, that's such a cool endeavor. And so, thank you for sharing your words and your wisdom through the treasured one with us. And so, um, tell us a little bit about your writing process. Like, did you find this is the first novel you've published, right?
It is. And it's
Okay.
actually the first novel that I've ever been able to finish all the way through,
Okay.
too. Yeah, I didn't know that it would be the one. I guess like some authors will be writing their book and they'll know, like, oh, this is going to be so successful. I can feel it.
Yeah.
I had no idea where I was going with it. I was having fun and writing something that I wanted to write. And that was the main thing for me. I was never really planning on it getting published at all or becoming big. Yeah, like, fingers crossed it'll become
Yeah.
big. Um, But yeah, as far as the process went, I always thought that I was a pantser when it comes to writing. So like just coming up with things and like not really having a plan, not really having a plot line, and just seeing what I'm inspired by as I write. But
Yeah.
I learned that that actually doesn't work for me. And my mom would be so proud. I was homeschooled as a kid, and she was
I
always
love
teaching
that.
me like, you always need an outline before you start writing anything. You need an outline. And I was like, nah, I don't need an outline. Like, this is my book. It's coming from my brain. It's my brain baby. I don't need an outline for that. But as it turned out, I did need an outline. So she was right. And yeah, once I actually had an outline and I didn't have like every chapter
Hmm.
planned out, but I had an idea of where it was going, of a few scenes that I really wanted to write and where they would go. So from there, it was just kind of connecting the dots throughout the outline and actually building the fully fleshed out story. Um, and then it was a lot of editing. After that, it
Yeah.
was a lot of editing. I mean, I went over it a couple of times. I had beta readers look at it. Um, I had uh an actual editor look over it and then proofreaders that came after I signed with the publishing company that I'm working with. They
Wow.
ended up connecting me to an editor. So lots of people have looked at it and
Yeah.
polished. So yeah, that's kind of been the process.
That's so exciting. Did you ever, I know we talked about in your intro as well, like for your day job, you're writing, and I'm
Mhm.
assuming in like a business capacity, but do you
Yep.
ever get burnt out from writing? Like when you're doing
Oh,
them
all the
both
time.
simultaneously? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I try to do most of my fun writing in the evenings and on the weekends. So that's another reason why I'm not going to be able to knock out a book a
Yeah.
month or anything like that. Because yeah, I probably write something like 2,000 words a day of marketing content for my job.
Wow.
And then, 5 o'clock, I log off. And at that point, usually I'm exhausted and I just want to lie in bed and scroll on Instagram
Yeah.
and something like that. But yeah, I try to still stay inspired and keep my story at the back of my mind so that when I do have the energy to look at it and to write some, like it's right there and I can just pick
Yeah.
it back up. So,
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself through writing?
ooh, I mean, from a technical standpoint, I've learned like what my strengths and weaknesses are as a
Mhm.
writer, I think, throughout this process. So like when it comes to marketing writing, you don't really need to have um, the whole showing versus telling and things like that. Like mechanically, if you're a decent writer, then that works for marketing writing. And of course, there are techniques and keywords and stuff like that involved, but it's totally different from
Yeah.
the fiction writing, where you want to have very descriptive language and you need to have characterization and you need to have a plot and you need to have all this. So, that's been a big one for me is learning past the mechanical aspects of writing, trying to learn like what actually makes for effective characters and an effective
Yeah.
plot and all that kind of stuff. So that's been a big one. And then also like learning what writing process works for me. That's been really great. Because you mentioned like I was actually diagnosed with ADHD only about 2 years ago. So
Okay.
for most of my life, I had a process because I've been writing for like
Yeah.
a decade, probably since I was like 13, 14, and just like scribbling in spiral bound notebooks. So I always thought that I had my process down and that I knew what I was doing. And I thought nobody finishes something that they're writing. Like I thought it was normal to get really excited about an idea and write a chapter or two and then be like, I'm done with that one. All right, on to the
Yeah.
next. And I thought that was normal. So being able to learn that about myself, that it's not that that's my process, it's that my brain works a little differently from most people, and I just have to find a way to work with that instead of against it. So being able to do the planning, and then thankfully I am properly medicated now, so that goes a long way and
Yeah.
keeping me on track and trying to actually be productive instead of just staring into the abyss of a white page and being like, what am I doing with this? So yeah, it has been a journey in more ways than one.
Yeah, and I imagine as you continue to write, like you'll continue to learn strategies that work for you,
Mhm.
right, to help you manage that. And um, yeah, and so that's again, I think, and I'm assuming, right, going but into writing now is you'll have the confidence behind you too. Like I did it before, so there's like that
Yeah,
step.
I mean, you would think, right? There's still imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
That's pretty rough. But honestly, it's been great being in a community of other authors and other writers. I found like Facebook groups and groups on Reddit and things like that, where everybody supports everybody else and everybody's there for you and they have suggestions if you need them or things like that. So that goes a long way in kind of helping you feel confident like you are
yeah.
achieving something and not just vomiting onto a page and then hoping people buy it. So, um,
Yeah, I feel like others have come on the show and talk about what a community has this
mhm.
process has brought them as well, and how it's been the writing community is so supportive, and it sounds like a great place to be a part of.
Yeah, yeah. And readers too. I mean, as a writer, I'm a reader first.
Yeah.
So, definitely, enjoying getting feedback from people who read my book and who enjoyed it. Like, that's crazy, but it's awesome. And hearing from people about other books that they're reading and what they liked or disliked about those books, like that can give me ideas for things to write about in my next books. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is a great community.
Well, wonderful. I feel like you've provided us a great segue to kind of take this to who you are as a reader. What genres do you enjoy reading?
Yeah, romance first and
Okay.
foremost. I am a romance girly, so actually, originally it was all fantasy, and I used to read like Gail Carson Levine. That is kind of like YA fantasy romance. She would have a little bit of romance in her books, but then I'd also read things like Terry Pratchett. That's like pure fantasy, and I just always loved how whole worlds and cultures and people could just be made up,
Yeah.
essentially. It was just so crazy and impressive to me. So fantasy was always where I was at. And then actually, it was just a couple years back, I guess a few years back now, back when I was in college, when I discovered ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J.
Yeah.
Maas. And that was life-changing, I guess, not to be like one of those people that's like, this book is my personality. Um, but it really did change my perspective because that's when I learned that, oh, you can have fantasy and romance like strongly together, and it can come with some spice. And that was really fascinating to me. Like I guess it had never occurred to me that you could have like sex scenes in books. So I was like, all right, I'm into this. So that kind of got me more into the romance side of things and more into the new adult and adult romance side of
Yeah.
things, where originally I had been reading purely clean, more adventure type fantasy stuff and now I was looking into more romance heavy stuff. And recently I've been getting into more contemporary romance and all the other kinds of romance, so dark romance, romantic suspense. Like I'll read anything as long as it has romance in it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much who I am as a reader now.
Good thing we have a lot of subgenres, right? Like we can keep it
Mhm.
interesting. We stay in romance and you can just keep going down the line. There's so
You
many.
really can,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's what I love about it because if I get tired of one genre, I can switch to another genre and it's like a subgenre. So it's still romance, but it's totally different. You can go from some like cute rom-com type thing to dark romance with like mafia and something like that. And it's totally different. So yeah, whatever mood is hitting, there's a book out there for it. I love that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm currently I always have an audiobook going and a hard copy book at the same time. And I'm like currently in an audiobook hangover. And I have never
Mhm.
had that before. Like I've had that happen with hard copy books, but now I'm like, I have tried two audiobooks and I've like abandoned them both. I'm like, this is just not hooking me in. And I like cannot figure out which way I would need to go. And normally I have my go-to genres of like when I know I'm like, okay, I need something, need to go back to the basics of what I really like, right? And I think as readers, we discover that the more we read.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
I am really struggling in I don't know if I have like my go-to genres in the audiobook format. Like just nothing is like catching my eye right now and hooking me in. And I'm like, I don't know. I'll
Oh,
figure it
well, I
out.
hope you find something you like soon. Yeah. I can never really do audiobooks. I need to see the words on a page. Otherwise, I get distracted and then I miss
Yeah.
something and then I'm like, what's going on? What are they doing? So, yeah, I'm a very words on a page type person. But I like ebooks. I used to be a very like diehard has to be physical book
Yeah.
person, but recently I've been really appreciating the convenience of ebooks because I have Kindle Unlimited. I needed Kindle Unlimited because I was reading crazy amounts of books and I could not have afforded them all if I was buying physical copies. So Kindle Unlimited has been great.
Yeah. Why
And
don't you,
yeah.
we haven't actually talked about Kindle Unlimited on an episode. Can you tell the
Mhm.
listeners a little bit about what that is?
Sure, yeah, it's a subscription-based service on
Okay.
Amazon.com. So essentially, like I usually buy the 1 year membership at a time. I think it's like 120 something
Okay.
around there for the 1 year, or I think it's like 11 or $12 a month. And essentially, it gives you access to a huge library of books, mostly indie authors, self-published
Okay.
authors. There are a lot of things from bigger authors as well, but generally, it's easier for authors to get into Kindle Unlimited when they're self-published versus getting into like bookstores and
Okay.
physical places like that. So that's why you'll see a lot more smaller authors and things like that there. Um,
So
and yeah,
once you have it, you get the book, like you can have the book for as long as you need to read it, right? Like, can it stay in your library or you kind of return it? Is it like a library system?
yeah, it's like a library system. So like you're
Okay.
able to take out 20 books at a time.
Wow.
So
Okay.
you'll kind of borrow them and then you have however long you want to read them. And then you would return them and send them back. And you can always buy a copy if you like. And then how it works is the authors that are part of the service, they're paid per page that you read.
Oh,
So
cool. Okay.
yeah, if you read the book, unfortunately, it's not a great amount of money. It's still supporting the author more if you buy the book outright, because
Okay. Good to
Amazon's a
know.
little stingy about that. But that's how they get their money out of it is that if you read the whole book, you know, they get a certain amount of money per page, and yeah, so you could take out 20 books and then return them as you read them, or in my case, like that's kind of like a second TBR for me, to be read pile. So I have like the 20 books on there, and then my mood will shift and I'll find a new book that I want and I'll have to return one of the other ones. And I never never get to the ones that I downloaded earlier, but you know,
Yeah.
it's great though, because you can read, you know, an unlimited amount of books. So really
Okay.
great.
Yeah, I had like a free trial month or something, and so I had used it,
Mhm.
and it was really great. Was going on a trip without my kids, so I
Mhm.
actually had time to read, and so I brought my Kindle on the airplane, and it was great to have that. And then after that month, I actually had so many interviews coming up of authors that had sent me their books that I'm like, I gotta let Kindle Unlimited. Like, I'm not gonna subscribe at this time because I'm like, I have to really focus on prepping for the interviews I had ahead, and
Mhm.
but so I hadn't known past the month because once that month was up, they did take the books back, which was fine. I
Mhm.
had finished the two that I had gotten for the trip, so it wasn't a big deal. But I didn't know like what happens if you keep it going for longer than a month. So thank you
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
sharing
Yeah,
that.
you're welcome. Of course.
Um, well, and then so in your busyness, how do you find time to read?
It's not hard because I don't really have hobbies
Okay.
besides reading. So, yeah, I mean, when 5 o'clock hits and I'm done with work, then I'll go lie in bed or I'll go to the couch and I'll be like, all right, what am I reading today? So that's part of why it's so hard to find time to write too, because I'll get sucked into a
Yeah.
book that I'm enjoying, reading it, and then I'll be like, well, why, go to the effort of coming up with my own when there's such good books out here to enjoy as a reader. So finding a balance between reading and writing is tough. But other than that, I really don't do much. Like I'm kind of socially awkward. I work from home, so I don't
Okay.
really leave the house. So
Wow.
that's all I do is the reading and writing. And then luckily I have dogs, so they do get me outside occasionally, so I get my daily dose of vitamin D. But other
Yeah.
than that, I don't leave the house. So
Yeah, you
that's
can
how.
travel through the pages of your books too. So
Yeah, why bother? And it's much more affordable than actually going anywhere. So it's great.
I've got my Kindle Unlimited subscription. I'm good to
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
I love it. Well, you've also been so gracious to bring up Book Flight for us today. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you picked these books?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of wanted to highlight a few of my favorite authors and especially a few kind of lesser known authors because as somebody in the indie author space, like I understand what it's like to be to not have, I guess, the support of one of the big publishing
Yeah.
companies. So really wanted to highlight some more some smaller authors there.
Well, I am so glad that you brought these indie authors because that was actually one of my at the beginning of every year I've done so far, this is the second year, have done a Bookish Flights reading challenge. And one of the ones this year I included was to read a book by an indie author because it's also the same. I mean, I think you can think about it the same as podcasting. You can think about it the same as authors, right? Of like helping people get their name out there, and so we can read their lovely stories. And so it'll be great that listeners, if you're doing the reading challenge, this might be where you can get some ideas for your to fill in that blank on your reading challenge. So,
Yes, hopefully. Yeah, so the first one that I had was Radiance by Grace Draven.
okay,
And this one I read a while back, and it's always been one of my favorites since in the fantasy romance genre. Um, it was originally self-published by Grace Draven in like 2015, and she
okay,
does have like several other books out, and she's been starting to get, I feel, the recognition that she deserves.
yay,
And this book has been getting a little more interest recently. But her prose is on another level, first and foremost. Like if you read some of her stuff, it's more mature, it reads more mature, and it's very um, just beautiful, like the language that she uses. And then with this one in particular, I loved how genuine the characters and the relationship development felt. That was a big deal for me. I feel like there's a lot of insta love going around, which can be fun, but I like to feel something that's a little more relatable and a little
yeah,
more genuine in terms of relationship development and that kind of thing. So that's why I really love this one. And the banter between the two characters is like great in this one. Like it's this human woman, and then she ends up marrying kind of for a political marriage between the two of them. She marries this um, fantasy guy who's from a different race, and they look very physically different. And
okay,
each of them thinks the other is totally hideous at first. So the banter is all like insulting each other playfully. But then they get to know each other and they start falling in love, and you see the banter kind of become like even though they're still insulting each other back and forth, like it's a cute kind of endearing
yeah.
playful sort of insult. So that was just so cute for me. So and that inspired me to write something similar where the love story feels real even though it's a completely fantasy world and you have like a little bit of the banter. I unfortunately am not as good a writer as Draven is, but I'm hoping that I can kind of get close to that level of banter in the dialogue that I really love from Radiance. So that's my first
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, the banter is always really fun. When I read that too, I always enjoy that good back and forth. And I think
Mhm.
that too of like, how did they write that? I don't think I could
Mhm,
do
mhm,
half of that. But I love the good banter. That would draw me in too. So thank you for sharing that one with us. So that was Radiance by Grace Draven. What's the
mhm.
next book you brought today?
Yes, so the next book I brought is called Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. And yes, it's a Harry Potter fan fiction, but the vibes and the plot and all of that, it was so good. I mean, I was never like I liked Harry Potter. I was never a Harry Potter girly,
Okay.
and I was never a Hermione girly. That's what they call it with Draco and Hermione
Yeah.
as a pairing. But then I read Manacled, which is another one, and I read this one, and I was like, all right, that's gonna be my personality now is Harry Potter fan fiction, I guess. So this book, I love how it gives kind of equal parts the cozy feels, and then you also have the stakes and the peril and the action that you want in a romantasy. Because sometimes I don't have the mental capacity for multiple books and world-ending villains and that kind of level of drama, like SJM level drama. Like
Yeah.
I love SJM, but sometimes I'm not looking for something epic. I'm looking for something a little more chill, but still having all of those aspects. So I feel like this brought that I was looking for. It's a little more what most people think of when they think cozy fantasy, but it also has, the action and all of that going on. And I know that the author of this one, Bridget Knightley, originally this was posted on Archive of Our Own, which is a fan fiction site.
Okay.
Um, but she was recently picked up by a publisher and she's rewriting it into an original book.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm really looking forward to that because I want to see that kind of banter and the characterization that she was able to bring to it and all that. And I think that book is going to be The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy. And I think it's coming out in 2025 or something around there, but she's working on it and I can't wait. Can't wait for that.
Yeah. I admittedly have never read fan fiction. So thank you for introducing
Mhm.
me to like an entire new genre of books today because I'm like I mean, I guess I would assume that these were out here, but I've never read one and so I never knew to look for them. And so you've very much intrigued me by a new genre today. Um
Mhm.
and even that like there's just all of the like you said, it's not you don't have to go learn an entire new world, which sometimes
Mhm.
I'm the same with fantasy as I feel like it's going to be a big commitment to jump into a series, especially if they're longer books, let alone they're usually a couple books long of a series. And I'm like, okay, that's a commitment. And I got to be ready for this commitment if I read this series. So this would be really fun because you already know the world to just
Mhm.
read a little fan fiction of that. So that would be great. So thank you for sharing that one.
Of
So,
course, yeah.
can you still, since she's going to be making this one to an original book, can you still get a copy of this one?
As of right now, you can. I
Okay.
believe she said until the end of 2024.
Okay.
And because it's a fan fiction, she can't sell it. She can't make money off of it because they're not
Okay.
her original characters. But
Okay.
if you go to Archive of Our Own, where it is, and you find it there, you can download it as like an EPUB file, I think, and you can keep it forever and
Okay.
it's yours. So you can do that. And she did, encourage that when she was saying, if you like this book, then hang on to it because it's going to be leaving eventually. I believe she's taking it off of all those platforms when she comes out with her original one. So get
Okay.
it while you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that one with us. So that was Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love, which is a hilarious
Mhm.
title.
Mhm. And it
And
gives
that,
kind of the vibes of that one too. Like it's
okay,
very kind of witty, tongue in cheek, like cutesy. Like yeah, it's good.
I love it. Okay, and that was Bridget Manley, you said, correct?
Bridget Knightley, I
Bridget
believe.
Knightley. Okay,
Mhm.
I wrote that down. Wrong. Okay, and then what is the last book you brought today?
Yes, the last one is called Bound to Fall by A.K. Caggiano. This is one of my all-time favorite indie authors. I stalk her on Instagram. I have bought all of her books. And originally, I actually read her books on Kindle Unlimited, so KU
Okay.
plug there. They are available on Kindle Unlimited, and then she also sells paperbacks and ebooks. The original series that she wrote is called Villains and Virtues, and
Okay.
that's a trilogy. And this is technically a spin-off of that, but I think it could stand on its own if you wanted to read it on its own. And what I loved about this one is the characters and the relationship development, of course, because that's my thing. But also for the imaginative world that she brings to life in her books.
Okay.
Like she is just brilliant in terms of crafting something that is fascinating and that also feels genuine and that her characters give off that kind of feel too. And then also her unique brand of humor. She does a lot of like witty dialogue and also like just the way she writes and the world like it's all just witty and fun. If you do read like Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, that kind of stuff, it's kind of similar. It's kind of
Okay.
um that kind of fantasy, like dry humor mixed with like imaginative fantasy world. Like I don't even know how to describe it, but it's really unique. And the fact that this author has some people who didn't care for her stuff as much, that is inspirational to me because it reminds me that like even though you can have something that's so good and unique and original and amazing, it's not going to be for everyone because
Yeah.
everybody has such different tastes. So that helps me as an author kind of coming to terms with not everyone's going to like my book, and that's okay because I have these books that I think are perfect and amazing and would never change anything about them, and they still have haters. So
Yeah.
that's really inspirational to me, which sounds kind of weird that like, oh yeah, my favorite book has 1-star reviews and like that's inspirational. But it's really valuable to me, that kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
So
And I could see
yeah.
how that would be, right? Of like, and we have to realize that going in is like we, even as people, right, we might not be for everybody. And that's okay. Cause like, just like you said in books, like the right book is going to find the right person. And
Mhm.
that's what's all that's going to matter. It doesn't matter the 1-star review or the haters, as you're saying.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
just try to buffer those off of you. Like, nope, I'm not going to take that in.
Yep, negative
So,
energy. No, we
yeah.
don't want that. Yeah.
And as you were describing her book, I was just thinking in how you're saying it's so unique. It's like you just have to read it to experience it. So we should just go
Mhm.
pick it up.
Yeah, I really do recommend it. If you like fantasy romance, the original trilogy is great too, and that's like super slow burn. If you like a slow burn and like the
Okay.
character development over the course of the series is great. And then this one that I'm highlighting today, like that one is amazing too. It's kind of one character that was mentioned very briefly in passing in the trilogy, but didn't have a
Okay.
big role. And then it follows her and her finding love, and it's just so much fun. And then the male main character is a himbo, so like a very handsome but not very smart type character. And those are so cute. I love my himbos, my golden retrievers, my cinnamon rolls, all those cute, sweet male character types.
Yeah.
That's the sweet spot for me. So I really appreciated that about it too.
Okay. All right. So that was Bound to Fall by A.K. Caggiano. And then how I love to end our show here is with our bonus pairings. These are just a speed round of questions that you can answer really quick. Are
Mhm.
you a rereader?
No, I'm not. I like reading things once and I enjoy it once, and then it goes sits on my shelf and becomes a shelf trophy, and yeah,
Yep.
that's it.
I feel you on that one. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
That would be Akatar. I mentioned
Okay.
that earlier. Yeah, it really got me into new adult fantasy romance, and yeah, that's been my life since. So
Okay. All right. And then where is your favorite place to read?
in bed, which is such a boring answer, but like I like being comfortable and
Yep.
I like being surrounded by blankets, and I have a small apartment, so I don't have room for one of those like huge beanbag chairs. I'm gonna
Oh,
get one
yeah.
one of these days, and then that'll be my favorite place to
There
read.
you
But for
go.
now, my bed.
Goals.
Yeah.
And then lastly, what are you reading next?
Ooh, I'm reading an art right now by another author called No Excuses.
Okay.
I want to say her name is Andrea Janelle. or something like that. I
Okay.
will admit I didn't look too closely at the cover. I was so
Yeah.
excited to dive in. But it's a cute, like, small town romance, grumpy sunshine, but the female character is the grump. So that's
Oh,
a
okay.
little, yeah, a little bit of a change. And I love a good grumpy sunshine. So I'm
Yeah.
enjoying that one so far. I'm only a few pages in, but yeah,
Okay. Well, I hope it's a great one for you.
thank you.
Yeah, well, and thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Hannah Levin and her book flight of fantasy romance books. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. You can now leave us a voicemail on www.speakpipe.com/bookishflights. We'd love to hear what books you've loved, what episodes have been your favorite, or a guest you'd loved hearing from. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.